As a way of an introduction to the presentation, we are saying we are only going to give an overview of workers' rights. But the most thing to remember is that workers' rights are human rights broadly. So whenever we are talking of workers' rights, we should take into cognizance that we are talking about human rights here. So in the presentation, we have not covered about international human rights instruments, because they also protect workers' rights. But take cognizance that there are those instruments that recognize workers' rights, like the ILO Conventions on Freedom of Association, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and etc. So we would like to just to give you an overview of the workers' rights in the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which now embodies workers' rights, the Labour Act, Chapter 28.01, which now have broadly provisions which deal with the rights of workers in the private sector, and those in the public sector and government are covered by the Public Service Act and others. There is also the collective bargaining agreement in the mining industry, which comes as a result of negotiations between trade unions in the mining industry and the employers. Let's move on. So the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which was adopted on the new Constitution, I'll start with the broad rights. As I said, workers' rights are also human rights. It now has those broad provisions which say even workers have the right to life. So whenever mining activities are being done, know that everyone has the responsibility, the duty to protect human life. There is also the right to personal liberty. There are circumstances where workers' rights are violated, that they are not given their personal liberty in the workplaces. The right to human dignity, the way how we are treating one another in employment, in some instances, it's not recognized the issue of dignity. So the Constitution now embodies the right to human dignity, just like any other person. The right to personal security, we must ensure that everyone is protected in Zimbabwe, including workers who are in the mining sector. Freedom from torture and cruelty or punishment. These are also matters that are arising in some of the mining industry where workers are being ill-treated. Freedom from slavery or servitude is also protected in the Constitution. Freedom from forced or compulsory labor, and equality and non-discrimination. The issue of discrimination, we have to ensure that in all policies that we are doing in employment, we should not discriminate one another. There is also the right to privacy now in the Constitution, so let's ensure that as much as we are doing our employment matters, we should not interfere much in the privacy of our workers. Freedom of assembly and association, this has become a very broad issue in Zimbabwe today, where workers' freedom of assembly and association is problematic. Even if you see the newspapers of today, the ZCTU processions has been banned by police to say you cannot be a march. We don't like. That's a violation of freedom of assembly as well as association. And right now, we're going to court tomorrow to defend the right. Freedom to demonstrate and petition. It is now clear in the new Constitution that we have the right, we have the freedom to demonstrate and petition. And if a police now say you cannot demonstrate, it's a violation of our constitutional right. There is the freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of movement and residence. There are political rights. Even workers have political rights, so they should not be discriminated to say you supported this party. If you don't support this party, you'll be fired from employment. Right to administrative justice. The workers should be accorded the right to administrative justice. If there are disputes, let them go to the courts to be resolved, or in any other forums where disputes can be resolved. Then the right to fair hearing. Whenever we believe our workers have done some misconduct, let's take note that they've got the right to fair hearing. We are not allowed to simply summarily dismiss workers. We must accord them the right to be to a hearing. Give them the opportunity to defend themselves. Even if you have caught them red-handed stealing, they still deserve the right to be heard. Maybe one will say, I did not steal Natora, or then it's up to you. Then the Constitution of Zimbabwe now have a specific provision, Section 65, which provides directly for the rights of workers, the right to fair and safe labor practices. There is the right to fair and safe labor practice. The other is the right to fair and reasonable wages. I have heard some concerns coming out to say the wages which are being paid to the laborers are definitely unfair. Yes, I concur. The minimum wage for the mining industry, which matter was concluded by the court about a month or two ago, has put the minimum wage at between $175 to $197. And imagine this mining industry, how much they are making from us and what they are rewarding their labor is something that we have to take into cognizance. There are disputes. You know, wages are arrived through a process of collective bargaining. They do bargaining, they don't agree. And whenever these agreements are made, usually the employers appeal to the courts, taking advantage of the delays in the courts. They know that this matter can go for a year or 2 years without wages having increased. So that's creating problems. So workers also in the mining industry have the right to form and join trade unions and participate in its lawful activities. The right to form, join trade unions and participate in its lawful activities. There are those employers, there are reports which we have, and also there are matters that we have attended, where employers will say, they will tell their workers not to join the trade union. Some managers say, you know what, I took you from our rural home, so if you join those people, you will lose your employment. So that's a deprivation of the right. Also, the right to collective job action, it's now a constitutional issue. Like what the South Africans are doing in the mining industry. There are lots of strikes there. The strike's purpose is to force the employer to provide labor with the just wages or better working conditions. Because that is the only tool that workers can use if they are deadlocked. If the employer does not accede to a demand, the only weapon that can be used by the workers is to withdraw their labor. So now the Constitution recognizes that the right to collective job action. We attended to some cases where workers were fired at Angel for having gone on strike. So now it's a constitutional right to go on strike. So let's take care of that. The right to engage in collective bargaining, as I said earlier, when the process of negotiating wages is through our National Employment Council or workplace level. Parties are allowed by the law to do collective bargaining. But so that right is now protected. Also the right to organize. Workers may want to organize themselves. You have the duty, or employers in the mining industry have the duty to provide that access, those facilities for workers to organize themselves. Right to form or join federations. They want to join federations, maybe workers in a particular mine, they want to associate themselves with the ZCT or any other federation, it's their right to do so. The right to equal remuneration. We should not discriminate to say because this one is a woman, this one is a man, the wages has to differ. But there is that duty now to equal remuneration. Finally, the right to maternity leave for female employees is now a constitutional right. Because at times we are attending to cases where employers will tell the employee that if you are pregnant, if you go on maternity leave, please go forever and don't come back. Why is it that you continue having a child every time a child, every time a child? That's counterproductive. That's some of their arguments, to say it's counterproductive to have children. Forgetting that the labor that are utilized at the moment is aging. Some are dying, some will leave employment. You still need replacement labor. So if you restrict people from going on maternity leave, where will you get the labor for tomorrow? It's something that they usually not take into consideration. As some would say, the mind of some of the employers is to say they are production oriented. Also, if you go to the Rights in the Labor Act, this is the principal act which covers the mining sector. There are a number of rights provided in the act. Rights of employees and employers to form, join, participate in trade unions. Even employers have the right to form the employer association. Whilst workers have the right to form their trade unions. The two then can do their negotiations, but there should be no interference among the two organizations, an employers association and a workers organization. Rights of workers to form a workers' committee. It's very difficult, maybe it's a company which employs thousands of people. Then you can't be negotiating with every worker every time there is an issue. Then you say in your individual capacity, come and sit down, let's talk about increasing wages. So workers can do so through forming a workers' committee. The workers' committee becomes the link between the workers and the management. They provide the workers' desires, they present to management, they negotiate and come to some agreement. Right not to be subjected to forced labor. If somebody does not want to work, you cannot compel people to work. Let those who want to work through their usual contracts of employment. The issue of discrimination is also not allowed. Discrimination with regards to race, tribe, place of origin, political opinion, color, creed, gender, pregnancy, HIV status or disability. That forms of kinds of discrimination are not accepted. Also, the right to fair labor standards. We must ensure that in whatever we are doing, we adhere to fair labor standards. The simple measure for fair labor standards is at times it's a problem. Somebody may say this is fair, some would say it's not fair. What is fair to you may not be fair to me. But there are certain parameters that any person can say this is fair, this is not fair. It includes the prohibition of payment of wages below those prescribed and prohibits working more than the maximum hours prescribed by law. So legislation is there, collective bargaining agreements for a particular sector in the mining is there. We have to adhere to those conditions that are provided in those relevant legislation. Rights of employees to democracy in the workplace. The issue of democracy is also an issue in the workplace. Employees should be accorded their rights to democracy, their right to be able to participate in decision making that affects their rights and interests. It's actually a requirement in terms of the Labour Act to say whenever you are making policies that impact on people's lives, especially the workers, they have the right to participate in the decision-making process before such an action is taken. So if management just sit down and come up with a policy waiving out some of the workers' rights or even without hearing their concerns, it's a violation of their right to democracy in the workplace. No one is allowed to obstruct, prevent an employee to form or conduct a workers' committee. No person is allowed to threaten any employee with any reprisal for taking a lawful action to advance or protect his rights and interests. So that's the protection which is afforded by the Labour Act. There are employers who are penalizing employees. You have joined the union. Here we don't want people who talk too much. They don't work. They talk about their rights every time. Then the person is dismissed. That is not acceptable. It's a penalty for having taken a lawful action. Some employees will go and lodge complaints to say we believe our rights are being violated. We attended to some of those cases where employees were dismissed for taking lawful action to address their concerns. There is the right to collective bargaining at the workplace in terms of Section 24. Collective bargaining in this country is on a two-tier. You can bargain at your workplace, you can then bargain as well at the National Employment Council. If you bargain at National Employment Council, you are setting the minimum for the industry. But there is nothing that bars employees at a particular company from engaging their employer to negotiate for conditions which are more favorable than those set at an industrial level. It's acceptable in terms of our legislation. Right to participate in industrial collective job bargaining, that's the other tier which I was referring to. Right of workers and employers to engage in collective job action. So, provided in terms of Section 104 of the Labour Act. This provision has been problematic. That's why there have been a lot of dismissals of employees, because following provisions under Section 104 of the Labour Act has been problematic. Employees failing to follow the provision. So now, with the new constitution now guaranteeing the right to strike, the right to collective job action, and the Labour Act having so much restrictions on the right, then we are in the process to ensure that the provisions of the Labour Act are aligned with the Constitution. Or in some of our advocates' strategies, we're thinking of taking those provisions to the court for them to be declared unconstitutional. Also, the Act provides for the rights of employees to a period of 180 days for sick leave. 90 days will be paid in full. Another 90 days, employees are entitled to half pay. Also, vacation leave, 30 days per annum. It includes holidays, Saturdays and Sundays when you are calculating the number of days. There is a special leave of 12 days per annum, which employees are entitled to use if there is a bereavement in the family, if they have been arrested by police, or they are appearing in court as witnesses, or they are attending a trade union meeting. They are what are called special leave days that they are entitled to. And a weekly rest of at least 24 hours continuous. You can give more, but the minimum is set at 24. Public holidays, these employees are not allowed to work on public holidays, and where they work, then they have to be compensated, either by granting the days or by payment. Maternity leave is 98 days for female employees who fall pregnant. They want to go on maternity leave, they are entitled to 98 days. And when they are back at work, they are entitled again to 1 hour breastfeeding time during working hours for a period of 6 months. The right to impartial dispute resolution system. The Act provides for a dispute resolution system machinery and procedure in terms of Section 93, and also through employment councils in terms of Section 62. There are also workplace codes of conduct. So employees can be subjected to disciplinary following those employment codes of conduct. But what is important is to note that the people who are administering the discipline must be impartial, so that the proceedings will be fair. Also, these employees get also the right to approach the Department of Labor. There is another process of resolving the dispute, or through the National Employment Council, there is a procedure of resolving disputes there. That is the process for conciliation, arbitration, or can go to the Labor Court, or some cases go as far as the High Court, some to the Supreme Court. It depends with the nature of the dispute and what the relevant legislation or code of conduct says when you are referring those matters. Then there is the Industrial Collective Bargaining Agreement in the mining industry, Statutory Instrument 152 of 1990. It requires employers to make available to employee a copy of the collective bargaining agreement. We have observed in some instances where employers will keep the copies of the collective bargaining agreements in their HR department, and they assume that every worker is aware of that. And it is only used as a weapon when some misconduct has been committed. So there is a requirement that the employers must ensure that employees have access to those collective bargaining. Or even go further to provide some trainings to the employees to understand the rules of the game, so that when somebody breaches a certain rule, the person was aware that there is such a prohibition. Collective bargaining provide a written contract of employment and give the employee a copy of the contract. There is a duty that the employer provide a contract. A contract must be in writing, although a verbal contract is also valid. But under this collective agreement, it must be in writing, and the copies must also be given to employees. We have seen or observed in most of the matters that we have attended to, where copies of contracts of employment are kept by the HR. The employees do not have copies. And in the event of dispute, you have problem of proving whether this was agreed or not agreed. And if you check with most employees, they will tell, I just signed, I never read that contract. Some don't even read, because somebody will be eager for employment, and to be told that you have found a job, believes it's lacking. So you don't need to go through all the details. But actually, they should be provided with the copies of the agreement. Place employees in their correct grade and pay not less than the stipulated minimum wages. There is a grading system under the National Employment Council for the mining. So employers have a duty to ensure that all employees are correctly graded and also pay the wages according to those grades. Right to payment of gratuity upon termination of employment by whatever reason. Whatever the reason for termination is, the employer is still required to pay that person a gratuity. There are schedules stipulated. If you work for 1 year, then your gratuity will be so much. If you work for 2 years, so much is provided under the collective bargaining agreement. And a record of service upon termination, has to be provided to the employees concerned. To work not more than the permitted hours. The industrial agreement prohibits working more than the hours permitted. To be paid overtime, or where somebody has worked for overtime, that person is entitled to a remuneration for such overtime. Right to rest during public holidays, you will see, is also a repetition of what is contained in the Labour Act. Right to be informed in writing of the details of any incentive scheme. This has become a big issue, where certain incentive schemes are not properly communicated to the employees. And some are given, you have shares here. But at the end, the employee is leaving. Employee will say, what's my share? It's not known. It has become a problem. But during the course of employment, one is made to believe that there are some incentives here, which on termination, employees are having problems to access them, and the right to protective clothing.